order the February 6, 2019 Planning and Zoning Commission. Roll call, please.
Barbie?
Here.
Buckley?
Here.
Castro? Klein?
Yes.
Maxwell?
Here.
Wright?
Here.
Chair Dow?
Here.
6 present.
Next up is approval of the agenda. Any additions, deletions, or corrections? And if none, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
So moved by Barbie.
Second.
Second by Maxwell. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Approval of the December 19th, 2018 minutes. Any additions, deletions, or corrections? And if none, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
So moved by Buckley.
Second.
Second by Maxwell. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. This is the public participation portion. Anyone who's in the audience who has any comments or questions about anything that is not part of the agenda is welcome to come to the podium. And there being none, I will move on to new business. Our first item tonight is a concept plan review, which is a request by 145 Fisk LLC, represented by Nicholas Kronauer, for review of a concept plan, sketch plan, for a proposed 40-room boutique hotel and associated commercial uses at 145 Fisk Avenue. And I open the floor to the presenter, if you have anything to present, which I'm sure you do. That was kind of dumb, sorry. If you can state your name and address,
Presenter's
please.
going to present.
It's one of those
It's been a
nights.
long week.
Thank you. I am Chip Bolson of Genoa, and I'm here on behalf of Nicholas Kronauer. He's listed as the presenter. I am here in his stead today to give information on the Fisk Avenue concept for the boutique hotel. I'll give a little bit of information, and please ask any questions. I don't know how much the commission knows about the project, so I'll try and keep it brief, and then hit me with any questions that you have.
And I'm going to interrupt you for a minute and
Sure.
just to kind of brief everybody, because this is kind of new for a lot of our commissioners. So I'm sorry, I should have done this before you came up, and for our
Sure.
audience. This is not a public hearing tonight. It's a concept plan. It's giving us the opportunity to hear about the plan, give some feedback, ask questions, things like that. So we'll let you present. We'll see if the city has any comments first. Then we'll let the public and then the commissioners just ask questions if we have any questions, or state any concerns. So just so everybody knows how we're going to move this tonight. Go right
Terrific.
ahead.
Thank you. The building at 145 Fisk is an old masonry building from the 20s. 1923, I believe, is its birth year. It's a great old building, has some great architectural character. The building itself is structurally sound. It is a solid building that, with a bit of work, can be a great boutique hotel, which is what we're proposing. The goal of the project is to renovate the interior and some of the exterior work to provide the upper 3 floors as lodging and the lower floor as an eating area and a utility area. We also propose on the north side of the building, or the rear of the building, depending on how you look at it, to have in addition on the rear of glass construction, which will lend a bit of a modern appearance on the north side. The south, east, and west sides are intended to stay architecturally accurate, including the entrance, which I will show you here. Dan has some great photos of it. The entrance there, we plan to rebuild that front entrance to its glory, including the windows that are above, which you can't see from the overgrown trees. Some of the aspects that draw us to the building is the masonry construction, the architectural detail, which is hard to replicate today due to cost, and also the large windows. Inside the building is very bright. I've been in the building before the windows were closed up. It's a beautiful, bright building, large windows, has great potential. In terms of its condition, we have had a structural engineer through the building. It's a solid building. and it can be renovated safely. And we did review the use with the engineers, and the structural engineer indicates that it can be utilized as a hotel. We'll go back to the beginning here. The aerial view, Dan's been so kind to enter into here, shows the general outline of the property outlined in black. The main structure of the building, shown in the center, is flanked by two, on the east and west, two smaller corridors which are similar to the main building construction. On the northwest corner, you can see a small square on the back that is part of the original construction. That's the old boiler room. It's kind of neat inside the old boiler room. It's very tall, very deep, and has some great character in that. This slide shown here is the preliminary site plan drawn by our engineers, which shows a preliminary plan for parking, a very preliminary plan for landscaping and layout. Does show circulation, shows driveway widths. This plan has 54 parking spaces currently and will accommodate all of the city's emergency access vehicles. The next slide I'll show here is a preliminary site engineering plan for stormwater grading. It does indicate an underground detention basin for stormwater in the parking lot. It does show some initial grading plans. There is some minor grading that would be needed on the north end of the building to permit accessibility. We reviewed accessibility on the building in depth. That's one of the reasons this building has been vacant, we believe, in our opinion, for so long. The lower level has a very deep basement to it. That was likely to accommodate utilities for an old building at this time, and perhaps other types of non-bedding uses in a hospital setting. But there'll be some minor grading needed on the north side. Otherwise, the site itself is pretty good in terms of grade and making it work from an engineering point of view. This is a color rendering of the building as we see it. The landscape shown does not depict what the landscape plan would be. No landscape plan has been entertained yet. We need to get the final site plans down and get all the engineering hammered out before we get into landscape. So the little bit of greenery you see here was just to lend some color to the building so that folks can understand what the masonry can look like with some great greenery around it when it's opened up and with windows on it, what it could look like in its final stages. This shows the rear of the building or the north end, and it also depicts a couple of changes that we would, one of them is very obvious. The glass structure on the rear would lend a modern appearance. It would also bring the outside indoors, we believe. And as guests would arrive, they could enter at this location or they could enter on the south end. We believe the vast majority of folks would enter on this side, the north side, as the parking is here. That would be an atrium, a lobby, a greeting area, a common area for folks who were lodging at the hotel. One of the things that is not as apparent is some of the accessibility that we've lent to the building. In the very center of the building, you can see a column of windows and a structural column right dead center of the building. If you look at the windows, you can see they're offset, indicating that that's a stairway. And right behind that would be two elevators. The elevators would go from the ground floor all the way up to the main floor with limited access to the lodging areas and limited access to the lower level. Also on the right and left, or the east and west of the building, the first two salmon-colored brick masonry columns with 3 windows on the east side and 2 windows and a door on the west side indicate new stairwells for egress, fire egress. Those don't exist now, and those would be added and also modified from the existing construction. The changes that would be seen on this side, the north side of the building, would be the glass structure and the new stairwells on the east and west. Otherwise, as it sits today, is what you would see there. This is a photograph showing the front of the building. This is, in my opinion, one of the most amazing parts of the building. If you were to enter this building and walk up the stairs, walk through those doors, and see the steps that are inside there and the flooring, it can take you back. It can take you back to the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and you can picture what could be inside that lobby versus an empty building. It's beautiful. If you see the details in the flooring, there's still wallpaper on the walls. It is a very glorious entrance that we would like to return to that entrance by using some of that wallpaper, perhaps having that replicated, and bring back this side, this entrance, to its original beginnings and keep that historical presence in that area. This is a small drive aisle that is on the west side of the building. This does lead to the north end of parking and provides access from Fisk to the parking area. So if folks were to turn on Fisk, they could enter parking there. They could also exit this parking lot and then head east on Fisk if they decided to. We would intend to keep this alleyway as is and improve it with a new improved surface to the proper widths to accommodate any emergency vehicles and customer vehicles and residential vehicles. This photograph here depicts the east side of the building, and here you can see one of those flanking structures. The only difference between this flanking structure with the boarded up windows is that it's a little bit lower than the main structure, and is just to give some architectural beauty to the building so it's not a square box. There is also this home depicted in the photograph, and we are in communications with the homeowner to perhaps add this property to the Fisk property to perhaps accommodate ingress, egress, and any other needs required by zoning. This photograph shown on the display shows an entrance on the north end of the building. We've had discussions with building and planning on this entrance. We would like to improve this entrance and also have a pretty long curb cut to accommodate right-hand turns into this location. And we would need to have a traffic study done as recommended by planning and engineering, or the engineer I should say, to finalize those designs and come up with the proper depths, distances, sightings to make this entrance work. Currently, as you can see, what likely was a parking lot at one time is now just grown over. It's mainly all grass and gravel. There are some trees to the there are some trees around the buildings, around the perimeter. There are some of them are significant, and we've had some public comments via communications through building, whereas one neighbor has addressed some concern with a couple of trees that lend to their property. We've looked at that. We've looked at those trees. We've looked at that property. Is that resident in attendance? No.
I think those trees were taken down last summer.
No. Nope, they're still there.
Okay.
Yep.
One resident then.
Yep. 2 trees. There is a what appears to be a cherry tree. I saw it in the dim light. There appears to be a cherry tree, and there's also either a walnut or some species of locust on site, which is Well, yep, thank you, Dan.
The lot the applicant's referring to is 521 DeKalb Avenue, which is this lot here.
Thank you.
And there's some vegetation behind the fence that they questioned if that was
That's
going to
the
be
email,
removed,
right.
and applicant's responding
Okay.
regarding that. So.
Thank you. There are 2 trees in that location. Will this work on the screen?
No.
The red, okay.
Yeah.
There are 2 trees in that location. Currently, the engineer has nothing designed for that area. It's likely to be landscaped in any event. We would seek to work with our landscape architect to learn if those trees can remain in the design, and we would also need to talk with building and planning, make sure that those species of trees are permitted, or if they may be on a list that's not permitted. I'm not sure if DeKalb has a list of trees that are and are not permitted, but we would work with the owners who have expressed concern to see if we can save them. If we can keep them on site, we would keep them on site. If for some reason we needed to remove those trees, we would work with that homeowner to address their concerns. It appears it was a minor comment, I shouldn't say minor, it was a brief comment, we believe, regarding shade, and we think we could work with a landscape architect to figure out a way to make that homeowner either continue their shade or come up with a new shading plan that works for them. We also had one other comment come in for the building directly to the west, the apartment building, who indicated they opposed the project, and based on what appears to be a residential use in the neighborhood. We have not had communications with either neighbor other than viewing the lots, going out and looking at them directly to respond tonight. And that is the project.
Okay. Do we have the microphone so that if people ask him questions, we're able to
Yeah, we can gather that.
have both
Yeah.
kind of going? I don't know if we
Yeah,
need it, but
we'd
just
ask
in case.
people to come up, but we'll grab the microphone if
Yeah.
needed. Yep.
Okay. Dan, do you have anything that you want to contribute before we,
Yeah, I can go
Have
through
the
the staff
residents-
report quick and
if you want to go ahead and have a seat, and then we'll bring it back up or hand you the microphone in a little bit?
So the report in the packet just gave a little background of the site. Again, as the chair mentioned, this is a concept plan. Our sketch plan is called in our UDO. It's not a zoning hearing. It's not a rezoning. It's just an opportunity for the applicant to get some feedback from surrounding property owners and the commission regarding the project before they go into the next step, a more detailed preliminary final engineering plans in the next phase. So a little background, as mentioned, the building was originally constructed in 1922 as St. Mary's Hospital. That was closed in 1965. The building was used as a girls' dormitory, operated by the Sisters of Mercy for a short time. And then from 73 to 92 was used by the DeKalb School District as administrative offices. In 1993, the property was sold and rezoned from the multifamily residential district to the current zoning, which is actually neighborhood commercial zoning. At that same time, there was a special use permit approved for about 12,000 square feet of medical dental offices at that time, but those uses were never established. And then the current owner, the property was sold in 2006 to the current owner, Midwest Estate Development, with intent to convert the building to some luxury lofts, and that project did not materialize. So the petitioner, currently 145 Fisk LLC, is contract purchaser, and the applicant went over what they're proposing: 40-room boutique hotel, associated commercial uses, improvements to the property regarding stormwater detention, access, a parking lot, landscaping, etc. Upper floors would be the rooms, with the lower level with the food preparation and serving areas. If the project goes forward, they would propose to rezone it from the neighborhood commercial district to the planned development commercial district, PDC. The 2005 comprehensive plan shows medium residential, density residential on the property. The applicant did provide in their documentation that was in the packets too, they did provide some support for how they feel the project fits within the goals of the city's 2025 strategic plan. That's in their documentation. So as noted, there's no official motion. Looking at comments from the commission is what we're looking for and from the surrounding residents. The council did first discuss this project on a conceptual level back in July 2018 at a meeting regarding if there was support for TIF, incentive to assist the redevelopment of the site to a boutique hotel with the commercial amenities as described. Comments at that time from the council at that meeting were generally supportive of the request. Then on December 18th, 2018, the council voted 5-2 to approve a resolution authorizing preliminary development incentive agreement for the renovation of the building to a boutique hotel and associated commercial uses. The agreement secured TIF funding for the project contingent upon several items, including the obtaining necessary zoning and plan approvals to accommodate the proposed uses. The agreement required the applicant to submit preliminary and final plan zoning petition within 120 days of approval of the agreement. So the rezoning was a condition. The agreement didn't grant the zoning. They still have to go through the process and meet all the findings of fact and the standards and have a hearing in front of the commission and final consideration by the council. Looking at the site plan, the developer went over the proposed building improvements, site improvements. As noted, they are proposing to relocate the access off of Sycamore Road, which is currently here, moving that further to the east, further away from the intersection. They're proposing a right-in, right-out access off of Sycamore Road. We're going to be requiring a traffic study regarding this in terms of any impacts to Sycamore Road, First Street, the signal there, and also impacts on Fisk Avenue. So if they move forward, a traffic study will be required. Currently, Fisk Avenue is a one-way road going from west to east, from First Street to 4th Street. That is one way currently. The access, as noted earlier, there's an area on the west side of the building that they're proposing to reestablish a 24-foot wide access. In this area here, shown on the image. And the edge of that pavement will be right up next to the property line to the west. As noted too, they're also looking into purchasing this property here at 201 Fisk to allow better access into the site and perhaps some additional parking. Regarding the parking, they show the parking lot, of course, between Sycamore Road and the building, showing 54 parking spaces. The UDO has a parking formula for hotels. One space for every room plus one space for every employee in the max shift. We also have parking requirements for restaurants based on the number of seats and number of employees. They do not have a detailed floor plan at this time, so they're not able to provide the number of exact employees or number of seats, so it's unknown at this time the number of parking spaces that will be required. They're indicating that they'll be pretty close to what is required to put on the site. It is required that you have all the parking on the site unless you provide parking off-site within 300 feet with approval, of course, of that owner. They may also intend to have some parking if there's an agreement to allow parking on Fisk Avenue. So looking at the concept plan, just on a preliminary level, we tried to identify some variances or waivers to the ordinance. With the planned development commercial district, any PDC district, there's a 50-foot buffer between the PDC and a residential zone district. So with residential zoning to the east and west, there's a 50-foot buffer required. Obviously, they do not have that with the building, existing building, and the parking is within that 50-foot on both sides of there too. On the east side, the parking is about 10 feet away from the property line. On the west side, it's close to 5 feet. The private drive is about a foot off the property line on that location there. And the existing building is just a few feet off the property line on the east side of the site. So there'll be a waiver request for that. Also, we require a 10-foot parking setback, paving setback off of any public right-of-way road. On the frontage along Sycamore Road, they're showing the parking is about as close as about 4.2 feet away at the closest point. Also, there'll be some, there's not a landscape plan required with the conceptual plan. They do show a few plantings on here. There'll be a full landscape plan required showing what trees will be, what vegetation will be saved, which ones will be new vegetation. There'll probably be a waiver regarding landscaping too. since they reduced setbacks on the site. So that buffer area is supposed to have landscaping in it. They won't have that width, so the quantity in landscaping is going to have to be waived with that. As they develop and finalize more of the plans, the variances or waivers will be flushed out a little bit more, and we'll know a little bit more if there's additional ones or not as they develop the plans in more detail. So our city engineer did look at the conceptual plan and also the site grading plan. They noted, there's a couple areas for on-site detention over here, and on the northwest part of the site, then it's underground detention in the parking lot is proposed. So not enough detail. They will be required in the next step to submit a stormwater management plan with the preliminary and final engineering plans. Also, as I mentioned before, a traffic study showing the impacts of, along Sycamore Road and from First Street. One of the images shows the access currently from Sycamore Road. That's going to be moved further to the east. And as you can see in the aerial photo of First Street, that turn, as everybody knows, you come up pretty quick and that access is right there. So they're going to move it to the far east side of the site and the right in, right out. But this area needs to look at too in terms of how that's going to work, in terms of that's a proper location or how that's really going to be designed. And also look at Fisk Avenue too in terms of impacts there. As mentioned, the applicant did respond to and is provided on your dais tonight. We did receive a couple correspondence since the agenda packet were posted on Friday from Delano Properties. That's the property directly west, the apartment complex, indicating no support for the project, citing concerns about noise and traffic, and keeping the residential zoning on the property is actually zoned neighborhood commercial on the site. And also the email from 521 DeKalb Avenue, that's Gary and Katie Heller. They own the property. They have the questions regarding the tree behind the fence there that provides shade, wondering if that's going to be saved, and also about the effect on the home values, and the applicant will need to respond to that in terms of the effect on the home values as they proceed. And they mentioned that as they develop their engineering plans and landscape plan more, they'll try and save those two trees. If not, they'll propose something different to provide the same amount of shade. So those were the two correspondence we did receive prior to the meeting tonight.
Okay, thank you.
That's all.
Okay. I do have one speaker request that I'll start with, and then I'll open it up to anyone else that would like to comment. So Robert Carlson. So when you come to the podium, if you can give your name and address this evening, we would appreciate it.
Thank you. My name is Robert Carlson. I live at number 3 Wedgewood Cove in DeKalb. And the reason I'm speaking tonight is I own 2 properties that are located very close to the subject property we're considering. And that would be this apartment building and this apartment building here. And also we own this apartment building. So there's 3 buildings right in the area. So my concern is the question of parking, the question of traffic, the question of noise pollution to these properties. We have 225 apartment units in DeKalb, and they're all located along First Street. So we're not influenced by the university. We have people that live there for long periods of time. And those 2 buildings, there are long-term tenants there, and they're older tenants. And one of the considerations that we take is they're close to the churches, close to the library, and now we're considering close to a noisy area or a noisy property that could affect us as investors and our tenants. So I think that should be taken into consideration significantly. I have a real estate appraisal firm that I've appraised in the DeKalb Sycamore area for 42 years. So I'm very qualified and very knowledgeable about property values. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson.
I have a question for the developer, if I
Sure.
can. It seems to me it's with the ambitious plan you have here with the hotel and a banquet center and so forth, parking doesn't seem to be adequate to me. And if there were too many people for a lot on a busy night, where would the overflow go? I don't see anywhere around there where you could park off your property on the street. Maybe they'll end up parking over in his apartment building, or they'll park in the church that I belong to across the street, or the school, which is not appropriate places to park. But where are people going to park if you get more than 52 places?
Chip, why don't you come up to the podium?
Thank you for the comments and the question. To address Mr. Klein's question about parking, we've had discussions with the school district and some neighboring properties regarding overflow parking if it was needed. We would like to get to some final engineering plans and have some larger discussions on parking. We believe we have some solutions to overflow parking, including if there were a gathering, corporate or family event, that we could have folks that would manage the parking at the time, as well as have off-site parking available for the building. During a non-event time, the parking appears to be adequate based on some other hotels that we've worked with, and as of right now, 54 spots is adequate in this preliminary design for the lodging and the food service. But as you mentioned, overflow parking does need to be addressed, and we will bring you a larger vision of that once we have it finalized.
But I don't see how you can control it. I mean, people get to an event, maybe they're a little late, the parking lot's full, they're frantic to find a parking place. Maybe it's the weather's like it is now, it's raining, etc. They're just going to park wherever they can find a place. That means his apartment building or the school or the church or something like that, aren't they?
Mistakes can happen. Our goal would be to have people available to assist in those types of events where people can guide people where to park or provide valet parking where parking could be done for folks who are visiting.
The second thing I'm a little concerned about is if that access is onto, what are we talking, Sycamore Road there, that's a busy, a lot of times, like at 5 o'clock, and other times, that's a very busy street. And that intersection, I don't see how people come around from First Street pretty fast sometimes. They don't even slow down. They head down there, and you're going to have cars coming in and out of this lot. Just a little ways away, it seems to me it's an accident waiting to happen.
We would address those types of concerns with the traffic study and have the traffic engineers look at those potential concerns that come up and see what can be done to be sure those events are reduced to the absolute minimum if there is a possibility.
May I ask you a quick question?
Sure, I do want to give the public some more opportunity. Go ahead.
Dan, when the two things. When the administration building was there, what was it zoned then?
It was zone multifamily residential.
Okay. And do you have any idea how many people were working in the admin building at the time? Because obviously that was, I mean, assuming 20 to 30 to 40, that was the means of egress in and out of the property then,
Yeah.
correct?
I do not know at the time.
And then the other quick question regarding the parking, do we know what, do you know off the top of your head or what the parking on Fisk is limited to, on-street parking?
I believe on-street parking is allowed. I don't think there's any restrictions on it except for, I think, proximity to First Street, there's some limitations, and of course blocking any other access, but I think it's unrestricted.
Okay, so potentially that would be, could be utilized too. I mean,
Well, they'd have to be some agreement to be able to use that. It's required that you provide all parking off the street on the
Okay.
site. It does allow the UDO parking within 300 feet of the property if you have the property proper arrangements or agreements with adjacent owners. But the parking on the street would have to be some agreement that would have to be reached in terms of allowing them to use that
okay.
for that use.
I have a question. I'm not sure who can answer it, but I'm going to ask it. When it was the hospital, where were the entrances and exits, and where was the parking then?
I believe, though, the parking's always been behind the building, you know, and you kind of see, and the access, I believe, you know, I can't speak for the entire, going back to the
Yeah,
20s when it was
I know.
built, but I assume it was always in this location, the parking always behind, and there was a cut here, you can see that there was an access to on the west side of the building. So
Okay.
I think throughout its history, that's generally where the improvements have been.
One more quick question, to Mr. Klein's point. Would the property owner be responsible for the improvements for the turn lane?
Yeah, they'd be responsible for any improvements that would be indicated in the traffic study of needed improvements. The responsibility would be on the developer.
Okay. And that property is just, that it sits on now, or that it would be potentially on? Is that part of the associated property, or is that
The one to the east you're talking about?
the entranceway, in other words, the grassy area that they would put the turn lane in now?
On Sycamore Road?
Yeah.
Yeah, they'd be responsible for any improvements on Sycamore Road or First Street as a result, as a impact, as a result of this project.
Okay.
That would be off-site, yeah, in the right-of-way,
Mhm.
any improvements.
Is there anyone in the public that has any questions or comments? You can come on up.
My name's Peter Gerlach. We live at 218 Sycamore Road. And it grabbed my attention when the Chronicle started touting this boutique hotel as part of a downtown revitalization. First, I don't know what boutique means, but it sounds overpriced to me, and that's not what this town needs. And second, this is not downtown. It is smack dab in the middle of a residential neighborhood, my residential neighborhood. I'm sorry that more of my neighbors aren't here. I see one of them. I've talked to several of them. None of us want this. This is a bad idea. It will change the flavor of our neighborhood. It will decrease our property values more than they have already decreased. I really hope you will quash this and quash it immediately. Barring that, if this does go forward, which I truly hope it will not, it's going to take what is already a horrendous traffic situation and make it worse. At a very minimum, the light at First and Sycamore would need to change so southbound First has a left turn lane, northbound First has a red right turn arrow. And that needs to be done no matter what. It should have been done years ago. If this is going to happen, what really needs to be done is Sycamore Road needs to be cul-de-saced just east of this entrance, because this is already a danger to the school children. A couple years ago, there was an accident where a truck hit a car, bounced off it, and hit my light pole enough to break it, missing my neighbor's daughter by 20 feet. The traffic's already horrible there. We do not need this added to it. But I really, really hope you will put a stop to this nonsense. Thank you.
I've got a question for you, sir.
Yes.
Don't you think if that building that's there now, the old hospital, continues to deteriorate, that would adversely affect your property values as well?
Oh, what's there is not ideal, no question. Ideal would be for the city to buy it, tear it down, and put a park there. But a commercial use with heavy traffic is just, no. We do not want that. It's a terrible, terrible idea.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No, not at this moment? Okay. Does anybody have, commissioners? Jerry's. Yep, go ahead.
What kind of experience do you have in this kind of converting hotels, buildings into hotels? You guys have any experience with that?
Yes, my experience is in commercial and heavy construction, as well as developing properties here and in other states. Converting this property, it's not necessarily a large property per se in terms of scope, square footage, and the size of the building. And being that the exterior shell is already in place, really you're looking at an interior renovation and some civil work on all the civil work on the exterior of the building, meaning parking, landscaping, access, ingress, egress. So to renovate this building is not it's not necessarily a large project per se, because it's out of the ground. When you're developing properties, your larger concerns are going to be when you're in the ground, or what you can find in the ground that can cause costs to, go out of control or skyrocket. So concerns developing this property are minimal, as it's already out of the ground, under roof, and is essentially an interior, I don't want to say renovation, an interior build-out with parking and stormwater.
Okay. What makes this more attractive than, let's say, the Hampton Inn? Why would I want to stay at the boutique? So give me some comparison difference.
I'm glad you asked that question, because Mr. Urbach mentioned a part of that, or what could be a part of that question. The goal of this hotel project is to create not necessarily a overpriced or high-priced hotel, but rather a 4 to 5 star quality lodging that is fairly priced. This market here would allow for that, and perhaps is in need of it. A boutique hotel is a hotel that perhaps isn't what you would find in your typical Hampton Inn or Holiday Inn, where it is a boilerplate model. Everyone looks the same. If you've been to, I can recall being down in Champaign many years ago, and I don't even know if it's still there. I stayed at a hotel called Jumers at the university. Oh, so we're familiar with that. That was a larger hotel, but perhaps designed, built, and decorated in a boutique fashion, meaning it's not what you're going to find elsewhere, perhaps a little higher quality than some of the typical brands you would see out there, and mass marketed as such. So the goal is a higher quality of lodging and a higher quality of stay. I travel quite a bit myself, and spend quite a few nights a year in hotels. So it's interesting what a dramatic difference perhaps $25 or $30 a night, or maybe even $40 a night, can do to a hotel stay. It can make your stay much nicer, much newer, much cleaner, and much more pleasant. So we believe the market needs a boutique hotel, meaning a couple more stars and higher quality, yet perhaps not overpriced, but priced for that person who wants that higher quality stay.
Okay. The first floor, you talked about it being a utility area and a eating area. Are there plans to have a food service or some other kind of restaurant, or what are you planning? Food court, maybe? I don't know.
Yes, we do plan to have food service. That final concept has not been completed yet. The goal would be to have as of this point, the design, and we don't have a floor plan now, but just our initial discussions among architects and engineers and ourselves, is that the western lower half could be a small eating area, and the eastern lower level would be more for utilities. And that is due to some floor differentiations that are down in that lower level. And the lower levels always provide good for utilities. We will need spaces for utilities. So you're talking, maybe 1,800 to 2,000 square feet devoted to food service. Small eating area, small place for corporate or family gatherings. Not a massive facility, but more of a quaint gathering area than a big center.
Okay. And my last question was the basement. You talked about that is presenting some problems, maybe, or what are the plans for the the basement area? What are you going to do with that?
Well, the basement area would be the lower level, as that's what I was mentioning.
Food court?
Food
Okay.
court, yeah.
All right,
The food and utility area.
okay.
And to answer your question, yes, it does. The elevations of it do propose a challenge, and we've been able to engineer some solutions to that.
All right. The glassed area, is that going to be like a lobby area, the entranceway on the back parking area? That's the plan for that.
Yes, that would be a lobby, an entrance, a greeting area, and also a common area. If someone were in their hotel room and perhaps they just wanted to come out and read the paper, sit in the sun, have a quiet area that feels open and large, they could do that in that area,
Okay.
as well as check in and, sit and rest in the area.
So I have a couple of questions based off of a few that Mr. Wright just asked you. So the food service aspect of it, would that be strictly for hotel guest use? Or would it be open to the public? People could come in, have a bite to eat, relax, have a business meeting?
The goal would be for both, that
Okay.
hotel guests could use it and the public can use it. If a hotel guest wanted to restrict it for a certain period of time, perhaps a corporate or a family gathering, we would like to do that as well. But those are just our initial talks. We haven't finalized that. But the goal would be that the public could come in as well as hotel guests.
So what do you envision the seating limitations would be? Like, how many people would you seat in there?
Well, we haven't gotten to that point. We hope to have an answer for you. The weather that we had this past week or two stopped our engineers. Nobody wanted to be out in that building. There's no lighting. It's dark. We have to use flashlights and portable lights we move in. It was so cold. We hope to have those answers for you. If I were to give you a visual concept just using this room, I would say that the lower level food service area, or it couldn't be much, maybe 1.5 times this room that we're in now. Initially, that's my initial thought. It could come out larger, but maybe 2 times the size.
Did you say 17 to 1,800 square feet?
I would say 1,800 to 2,000 would be a guesstimate at this point.
Are you talking about that being an actual restaurant? Or is it catered? Or is it like continental breakfast? What is it? What do you mean when you say food service?
Food service meaning a small restaurant, but also in the mornings serving a breakfast for people. Perhaps a higher quality of breakfast than the continental breakfast you would find in a typical hotel, but not a high volume restaurant per se.
It would be primarily for the people staying at the hotel or for anyone in the community, the restaurant, or coffee shop or whatever?
Both. We would love it if community members were able to stop in, if they wanted to have a bite to eat and go home. That would be great, or for guests who are staying with us, we would like to utilize it for that as well.
So in the descriptions that you've been giving us, my assumption is, and correct me if I'm wrong, this would be a hotel that would be owned locally, like not a chain, not, it'd be locally owned, basically.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. Yep, come on.
Can I ask you a question?
You'll have to come to the podium. Yeah, you can come up.
Again, Robert Carlson. I was questioning, is there going to be alcohol served in the facility?
Good question.
we don't have we haven't decided on the concept yet for alcohol or no alcohol. If it's possible, we would like to perhaps serve alcohol, but we need to know what the final use is in that lower level. So for right now, I would say let's have alcohol as a possibility, and then work on that once we get a final floor plan down.
And again, you know, we're all residents of DeKalb and very familiar with Northern Illinois University. We know weekends like homecoming that there's a lot of alcohol being served, and so once again, I have to be concerned about my tenants on those 3 buildings, and they're older tenants. Could even possibly say that those buildings are God's waiting rooms for some of my tenants. So I'm very concerned about that, and you have to make that decision, and you have to protect not only the ideas of the developers, but certainly something that's been there for years, and that is the buildings that we've invested in. And if you want to check Carlson Properties, Carlson, my wife and I are partners, and then my son in New York City is also a partner. So we have great concerns, and you know, and to speak of Ron's question to this other gentleman, that the deterioration of the building versus this use, well, that building's been deteriorating for a number of years, and yet none of my tenants have ever questioned it, but I'm sure my tenants are going to question once somebody comes out and starts parking in the streets or parking in our lots, and or stumbling down the streets if there is alcohol being served on homecoming weekend. So thank you.
I've been familiar with your ability to value property for the last 30 or 40 years. Do you think that the building that's out there now, the old hospital, has more of an adverse effect or less of an adverse effect on the value of surrounding property than what they're proposing?
And again, it's what they're proposing can have some conditions that can be adverse to surrounding properties. You know, to be honest with you, right now, it's just a building that's very quiet. You can drive by it, and
thank goodness.
I have one of my clients that said I would never buy that building because there's too many people died in that building. So that
Well, I know a lot of people that were born there.
Yeah. So that, you know, it's just a consideration for me, and I would have to say that we are concerned. I've had people that won't buy a house with a cemetery in the background because of the fact it's a cemetery and there's deceased people. So there's unique considerations here. Thank you.
Thanks. Yep, come on up.
Hi, my name is Dan Steimel, and I just happened to pop in tonight because I was a little curious about the topic, but a few things have raised my interest here. Really, this building's in the middle of a historic district. It's got the Elwood House on one side, and it's got the Gerler House on the other, so it's not just a residential area. Being a boutique hotel, I'm assuming that it is going to draw a crowd that is a little more mature and probably not the crowd that you're real concerned about as far as a college crowd. So I think it'll have the mature crowd that'll probably fit in with your apartment buildings. As far as parking problems, overflow parking, I think that if there's a lot of people going to an apartment, they'd be overflowed in the street, just like there could be any concern with any other property in the area. One solution I do see is if you're able to acquire that house on the east side of the building, in and out parking would be accessible there, driveways, and not have to worry about the northwest part on Sycamore Avenue there. that would be an easy solution to the whole problem there. But, you know, if it works, you know, I have questions whether it'll financially work, but if he's willing to try it, if it works, I think it could be an addition that would be good for the community. Apartment buildings can cause problems too. It wasn't Mr. Carlson's properties, but there's a building right next to it that the SWAT team was out there and they had DeKalb shut off about a year ago for about 8 hours because there was a problem at one of the apartments. So those have their issues at times too. Like I said, it wasn't Mr. Carlson's apartment. But I'd say give it a chance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, come on up.
Good evening. I'm Mrs. Rodeo. I live at 222 Sycamore Road. My question is, how many jobs is this going to create with so many businesses closing downtown? Are we going to be bringing, you know, for your customers something to do? You know, how many jobs are you looking at for having permanent jobs, whether full-time or part-time? You know, in an area that is, we are economically hit. You know, looking to build and bring in new jobs in a different concept. Any idea of how many jobs?
To address the question of jobs, yes, the project would create initially a lot of construction jobs, construction spending. And then secondarily, there would be full-time staff at the hotel, anywhere from 4 to 5 full-time jobs within the hotel operation itself, probably a few part-time jobs, and then the food service would likely accommodate 3 to 4 full-time jobs and perhaps some part-time jobs on occasion. But that would be the impact on employment locally. In terms of people coming to stay and having maybe a small corporate gathering or a group that's visiting a business locally, certainly they're going to visit local businesses. Your typical things when you're traveling, minor travel needs that you need. People will spend money when they come to a district that does have lodging in it.
Is there anyone else in the community? Come on up.
Hello, I'm Nathan Books. I'm the neighbor at 201 Fisk Avenue, so I'm basically 4 feet from this property. You said the mechanical engineering is going to be on the east side. Can you kind of describe where that will be? Because especially like if air handling units have been identified yet, due to the sound that air handling units would create. I work from home, so this house right in the corner over there. I may not be able to do my job if an air handling unit is put in that corner.
Excellent question. And I'm glad you brought it up because I wrote down noise as an earlier question. Air handling units are proposed for the roof or in the lower level. So there should not be any noise from air handling units affecting neighboring properties. In addition, air handling units, just in general across the board commercially nowadays, are very quiet for the higher end product that this type of building will require. The long, narrow shape of this building is going to present some unique mechanical engineering that we have to do. Not unusual or impossible, but when we looked at it initially, one of the things we said was we want to maintain the historical integrity of the building, so we are seeking to avoid any penetrations into the masonry to a great degree. You'll see in hotels that typical unit that goes through the wall, those are noisy. I'll agree with the neighbor. He's absolutely right, and our intent is not to use those. Initially for the historical significance, and then secondly for the noise The fella that owns the neighboring apartment buildings brought up noise as well. One of the things to remember with any type of lodging or a hotel, what you're really selling is a night's sleep. You're not selling a party or an event. Folks are generally pretty tired and they just want to sleep. So the goal is to have a very quiet, the quietest possible property you can have so folks can sleep. If you don't sell a good night's sleep, you will not remain. So the goal of a quiet, quaint, low-key property is the goal. And our hope is that as quiet as it is now, it should be. Folks who visit a hotel, they generally park, get out, go in, put their things away, and that's it. They're out for the night. They may go, the hope with this is that if we have the small food service inside, they can go downstairs, have some dinner, and then go back to bed. And if local folks would like to visit, they can enter from either end, visit the food service area, have a small meal, and head home, or visit with friends and go home. And again, the whole goal of a hotel or any type of lodging is quiet, because you are selling a night's sleep, and that is the goal. So we hope that addresses the initial noise concerns.
So kind of along with his question, and I know this is a concept plan that you've presented to us, where would you anticipate putting the garbage dumpsters?
Garbage dumpsters, the goal would be to have a totally enclosed structure on the exterior, perhaps in that furthest west triangle. We talked about making some modifications there, or on that, on this, see, how can I describe it? On the, just a bit north and east of there, somehow come up with some type of a use in there. That is one thought that has been brought up. Some of the things we've done in other properties that are of this nature, where you don't have a lot of ground space, is to have a small utility building which looks like a garage in a home. And we talked about having a garage perhaps in that western triangle, and having garbage service come twice a week, and that would avoid any garbage buildup or what have you.
So the northeast area that you were talking about, where approximately?
Well, we talked about that area that's currently undeveloped, or not designed as developed, just a bit east of there. Or
so that open yard space there?
Not necessarily there, but if we're able to adjust our parking, perhaps taking 2 or 3 of those parking areas and utilizing that, if we can come up with parking, 2 or 3 parking spaces elsewhere, or directly west, where that, if I may, directly west of this area.
Kind of in that, okay.
Yeah.
So I would like to make a recommendation for you to consider not putting it over in that northeast area, because that's going to bump up against residences.
Okay.
To their backyards.
We can do that.
Granted that the west one is going to back up to the apartment building area, but...
That's the garage, though.
Oh, that is a garage space there. Yeah. So perhaps... Hey, Jeff, I don't know if you can turn my microphone down just a little, please. Thank you. But I would, if you can consider that as the location for the trash, that west area, just so that you're taking into consideration those neighbors that are on that northeast side.
Mm-hmm. We can do that. We can also look at timing too, for collection times, to be sure that there's no early morning or late pickups, that any type of garbage collection is coordinated perhaps late morning or early afternoon to avoid common sleeping times.
So I know often when we talk about buildings and parking lots, we talk about deliveries. So is this concept of this parking lot adequate enough for a delivery to come in, go out, and do any turnarounds that might be necessary?
Yeah, we'll have which we do in all these, have our fire department review the plans too, to make sure that the equipment can go through there. And usually we do require sites like this, smaller where there's, they do have to provide turning lanes or driveway widths of 24 feet to meet our UDO requirements. But we'll have them put the truck templates on there to make sure that vehicles can turn. There's adequate radius through the parking lot to get in and out of there.
Yeah, but that, I guess you could call it the southeast kind of.
Tight radius.
Yeah, that looks really tight right there near the building, yeah.
What do you see as the source of most of your customers? How are they going to find you? The people sailing past on the toll road aren't going to come. How do you see yourself drawing customers and from where?
There's two sources that would be primarily used. Obviously, the answer everyone gives today is the internet. I don't have an exact statistic for you, but the vast majority of travelers will utilize the internet to find their lodging. There are also co-ops among the hotel chains, and their rewards programs generally will guide people to a certain hotel based on that rewards program's demographic that they're looking for. And albeit you'll see branding among chains, there is sharing among the advertising to direct people to the hotel. So if someone's in a rewards program and they're looking for lodging in that area, they'll likely be guided by their prior purchases.
You mentioned Jumers in Champaign. 65 years ago, I was a bellhop at Jumers in Champaign. And a great many of the customers that came there were associated with the university. They were visiting the university, visiting their children, that sort of thing. I assume that might be true here with Northern.
Yes, and we also see the local manufacturing district as perhaps people coming in. Also, a lot of the retail in Sycamore, they will have corporate travelers in to check their retail operations. All the real estate owners up and down through the Sycamore area, and the manufacturing that is in Sycamore and DeKalb. We believe that those types of guests would also seek, in addition to the university, which will absolutely bring a following to the location.
I used to carry suitcases up once in a while that sloshed. So somebody asked if they'd be drinking there. Yes, they'll be drinking there. They were heavy, too. For sure.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm going to steal your question. Signage, what are your plans?
That is a good question. We have not looked at that. And on the south side, signage would be very minimal. Perhaps limited to a wall plaque. The goal of the south side is to maintain that historic beauty that's there. On Sycamore Avenue, I believe a ground mounted pedestal sign would be appropriate. That doesn't project perhaps more than 8 or 9 feet off the ground. Something just enough to catch the eye that says, turn here, we're here.
You said you are in negotiations with the people with the property to the east, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And again, going back to the parking issue, I do think it's going to be pretty tight. I mean, just based on the fact that you had said that you'd have somewhere between, I think you said 1,800 to 2,000 square feet for a restaurant, assuming there'd be kitchen facilities and stuff. I looked it up real quick. Normal density for 1,200 square feet, or 1,200 square feet would be 80 people. Assuming we're going by your math of one person or 3 people per car, that's 26 in the restaurant. If you include 5 staff and heaven help if you'd ever have it, but full occupancy in 40 rooms, that's 71. So, I mean, I think it really would help if you were able to acquire that property, because I do think parking will be an issue. I mean, that's, again, just quick math, assuming full occupancy and you had a party with 80 people in the restaurant area at the same time that was unrelated.
we agree that the parking needs further review, and I think 80 people would be tough to fit in that area, but we can work with planning and fire to learn what, based on what our floor plan ends up being, what is allowed and what we can do, and we can bring back to the board here some harder numbers on occupancy in that area and also parking.
Okay, is there anybody else in the public that would like to speak or have any? Sure.
Thank you once again for the follow-up with the HVAC. I just wanted to offer my support for this project. This building has sat vacant for a very long period of time, and it is not quiet. You know, you can look through my 911 call records, which happen pretty much every 2 months. So there are people living on the back of the property. There are people constantly vandalizing it. Every summer, it's going to happen again in the spring. This building will continue to deteriorate as long as it stays idle. So I think my biggest concern is the safety of the traffic of coming in and out of the property, because if you try to cross at that First Street intersection, you will get hit, or someone's going to slam on the brakes and nearly hit you. So that's my largest concern, but I do offer my support for the project.
Thank you. So with finishing this up, I do want to just make...
I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You've heard some of the neighbors talk about traffic. Now, you're doing traffic studies, or what do you say to those people who talk about the traffic on Sycamore Road, First Street? How do you address that?
I believe it's a valid concern, and I believe that the engineers that have been engaged to design this, and they will further engage traffic engineers to complete the study, can create an entrance that is safe as possible. I have worked on other lodging properties that are on roads of much greater size with similar tight turning, not necessarily where there's a Y in the road, but where a similar entrance comes at a crest in a road. So you've got some issues with sighting there. As you're coming up over the road, your eyesight tends to shoot up and over versus staying in line. And the resolutions that they created appear adequate. There have been no accidents. As a matter of fact, there have been no accidents, no rear end accidents, whereas prior to the development, there were quite a few rear end accidents there, mainly because there wasn't a right turn lane into the property, and now there is, and this is a similar addition here. Obviously, we have to have the engineers look at it in greater detail, and that's where I think that the traffic engineer working with the civil engineer can create a safe entrance. But it is a valid concern.
So you're saying that because of this project, it could make the area even safer than it is now with traffic?
If it's designed properly and folks drive within the expectations of the engineer, sure, yes. Yes, I do believe it can improve the entrance there, absolutely.
And the news sources are all here, so they'll quote you on that. You know?
That's it for me.
That's it. Anybody else? No?
So under the concept plan, there's been a lot of questions and comments, so there's no official motion, but any kind of direction from the commission in terms of support of the project or not support, or things to look at or work on as they would go to the next step would be appreciated, you know, in terms of for the applicant.
So Jerry, do you have any further or anything that you want to give to suggestions, thoughts?
No, I think a lot, you know, when he talks about the traffic studies and some of the other things that engineers are going to do, I think I'm hopeful for the project and would like to see it go forward. So.
I would agree. I mean, being a lifelong resident, I would love to see a dilapidated property improved and turned into a useful one again. And having sat as long as it has, and obviously I didn't know there were still issues with vandalism, but I guess I could have assumed as much. Barring the parking issues and the traffic studies, I would like to see it go forward too.
I agree with my fellow commissioners that this is probably a good idea if all these things can be worked out. And I think it's, I drive by there a lot and it doesn't look nice. And in the summer it doesn't look nice. It's kind of a blight on the community. So it kind of fits in with the plan that we're having, the strategic plan or whatever we call it. I think it fits in to that plan really well.
Well, I will echo their sentiments and add a couple of things. I think if it is done right with respect to the area residents and neighbors, the only thing I might suggest is that that it's not a restaurant, that it is food service for guests only. That's one of my concerns, is that I don't know that we need another restaurant in the area, plus I don't know that you need that additional traffic in and out for that, rather than just for the guests. But other than that, I would love to see something happen like that.
Well, as I said at the outset, I don't think there's enough parking there personally. And I think trying to get out on Sycamore Road with traffic coming off of First Street at a high rate of speed is a dangerous situation. So I think somehow that's got to be dealt with. You know, I was thinking, if that was an empty lot, if there was no building there, I doubt if they would want to locate this hotel in that spot, in that location, given the parking problems, access. So the issue really comes down to, is it worth doing without maybe adequate parking and access just to preserve that building? Now, the building is a liability there, I agree. It would cost a fortune probably to remove it. I had lots of family members born there and other situations. Historically, I don't know that it means that much to me, and I like history and I like preserving history, but that's what I'm balancing in my mind. Is it worth doing what we're talking about? Limited parking, no place for overflow parking. You say they can work that out, but where? On neighboring churches or apartment buildings or the school? And that access, they come around off of First Street. I see it every night, pretty fast there. Nobody slows down for the light or anything. They whiz around there. Is it worth it to preserve this building? And that's what I'm balancing in my mind. I don't know what the answer is.
I'd like to follow up just by saying I'd like to see the next step with some of these 8 questions answered, and satisfied as far as parking and safety and traffic and all of that kind of stuff. I think it's hard to make a decision without that. But I would like to see it go forward to the next step and get some of those questions answered.
I agree. I'm also on the fence as to whether I support it, but then I don't. And I keep going back and forth on this. I've stayed in some hotels in the center of residential areas that are like this. They're boutique-y, they're cute, they're pretty cool, they're eclectic, whatever. And I have to say those have been some of the probably most fun hotels I've stayed at, even though I wasn't there to, hang out. I was there, as Chip had said, to sleep. But I've wanted to see something happen with this building for a long time. That area, the building is beautiful. And to see it get preserved, I think, is important to me. But what goes there, that's what I keep going back and forth on. So I think we've offered some suggestions for everybody to think about and to come back on. My concern also is that Sycamore Avenue turn off of First Street. I've seen some near misses to me when I've taken that curve, or there's been traffic stopped to turn into one of the driveways in the residences. It's a tough spot, and I think some of it is not only just that turn off of First Street, but there's that you turn and then there's that little curve. If we could just get rid of that curve. Because my biggest fear has always been running into one of those houses along the way there. I love the concept. I love, you do? Yeah, which is probably your house, I'm guessing, yeah. And I've always wondered, what if? No. I love the concept. I love the idea. I love the plan that you've presented to us, the thought about it and the thought behind it. And I really like the fact that this building is able to still have something done with it without, you know, tearing it down and starting over, because I don't think I would
An
support
element
that.
with regard to the traffic that we maybe didn't directly mention, there's a lot of children across the street.
Yes.
At the school, crossing that road, and that would be a factor, I think, to consider.
Yeah. But I also think, too, when we're considering about a hotel, there really won't be a lot of in and out of the hotel during the day. You know, maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when hopefully school is out. You know, so there's some of that up and down and back and forth in my head. So I look forward to seeing what comes back to us. Bravo to the work that you've done so far, and we'll see what happens. Okay.
I'd like to thank the commission for sending out this very informational packet. I didn't know this was here tonight.
You're welcome.
And I'd like to ask that at each step of this, you let us know again.
Yeah, so when they bring the plan back.
Yeah, they'll go to the concept plan will go to the council at the end of the month.
Okay.
The last meeting for discussion 2 on the 25th, and then they'll have to, if they go forward, they'll proceed with the rezoning petition and more detailed plans. And a hearing will be set up, and the owners, the ones that did receive it, you also get a public hearing notice. Any owner within 250 feet, so the ones that did get it, you'll get it again regarding a hearing, noting the date and location of the hearing, and some supporting information too. So you'll get noticed again.
And so the public hearing offers you another opportunity to come and speak. You'll hear a little more in-depth detail about where they're at, what they're actually going to do with the, you know, the building and the plans and things like that. So it gets a little more in-depth for you, and for us too. Yeah. So we appreciate you that have come out tonight and given us your input as well, because I think that's an important piece. It is for us that you have input on this, so we appreciate you coming out tonight as well.
I think the presentation was very good.
Yeah.
Incidentally. Whether I end up agreeing or not, I don't know, but it was a good presentation.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so we move on to our second item, which is a continued public hearing for the petition for approval of City of DeKalb initiated text amendments to Chapter 23, in quotes, Unified Development Ordinance of the Municipal Code to amend Article 7.06 to further restrict the type of fences allowed, Article 7.12 to change who authorizes traffic studies, Article 12.03 to allow alternative paving materials for parking lots and driveways, Article 12.04 to modify the landscaping and berming requirements for front, side, and rear yards, Article 13.02 to excuse me, allow variations for off-site temporary signs, Article 16.03 to change the reference from Board of Appeals to Planning and Zoning Commission regarding appeals, and Article 18 to amend the regulations regarding the reference to the Board of Appeals, the appeals process, and clarifying what variances can be applied for. So I turn it over to the city.
Thank you. This, of course, was a continued hearing from January 23rd. We had some initial discussions on December 5th. We set a hearing for the 23rd. There was some feedback from the commission to have staff do some additional research in terms of some language changes. We did that, so I'll just go through and summarize what we took a look at since our last the hearing on the 23rd. Article 7 is the fences. The proposed changes related to the list of prohibited fences. We wanted to expand that from the current language. Language we had proposed before was to prohibit these following fences: electrically charged, which is already in the code as being prohibited; adding chicken wire, permanent snow fence, or any other fence constructed of materials not specifically manufactured for use as a fence or from used or discarded materials in disrepair. There were some comments from the commission that was a little too general, and we needed to be more specific, so the language proposed is shown in the report in the attached Exhibit A. Prohibited fences would be electrically charged, chicken wire, permanent snow, or any other fence constructed on materials from used or discarded materials, including but not limited to corrugated metal, plywood, or other type of sheet metal. So we thought that was a little more specific in terms of the material that we're looking at to make sure the list is a little more specific on prohibited fences. We also did add language per the commission's direction to exempt the underground electrical dog fences. Those would be allowed. And finally, we did add no changes, but we have some changes regarding allowing temporary fences in certain situations as listed as determined by the chief building official. So was there any comments regarding the change in language on fences?
I think the.
If not, I can move to the next one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you guys have any questions, concerns? Okay.
The next article, 7.12, was the traffic access and impact studies. There was discussion regarding, comments regarding from the commission regarding some past projects where you wanted to have additional days for traffic counts done. And as kind of mentioned, we didn't propose any changes here. The language currently does state the parameters, kind of the step-by-step of how the traffic study is done. The changes relate to shifting the authorization to proceed with a traffic study or what should be in it from the city council to the city engineer, which has kind of been the past practice. The current language does talk about the study parameters being discussed early on between the city and the applicant before they get into the traffic study. It references industry standards that have to be followed for traffic studies. So we thought putting something detailed about the number of traffic days that traffic count should be done is too detailed and should be determined on a case-by-case basis. I did relay the concerns to our city engineer about the making sure that we have enough days and traffic counts, and referencing the past project, the hotel in Annie Glen. There was concern about just doing 1 day for the traffic count there. So I did relay that to our city engineer, and that will be taken into consideration in future studies to make sure we do have adequate number of days. But to put that in the code now, if we put in 2 days required, there may be a project that maybe you do for 3 days, or it's so small that only 1 day would work. So we don't want to probably get too detailed on that. So I think the language does cover us, and the copies are provided to the commission during the process. You get copies of those, so you can comment on those and have input on those too. But the parameters are kind of set out early based on kind of what the project is and what our city engineer sees that needs to be looked at specifically for that. So there's no change in that language. The Article 12.03, talked about construction requirements, parking lots, driveways, commercial and single family, residential, regarding allowing concrete paver blocks in there. So language was added to allow these. We've had some inquiries before about having these allowed for driveways, storage areas, to allow these concrete pavers. So our city engineer, and it was in the language, presented some very detailed requirements for these. In single family, there was some specs provided that were kind of minimum for concrete pavers in terms of the depth of the brick, the stone base, in terms of something that would be long-lasting, but allow something a little cheaper than asphalt and concrete for these driveways or secondary storage areas. We did have somebody from the public speak at the last hearing on the 23rd, Mr. Schimmer, 744 Kimberly Drive. He did submit did comment about allowing some other alternate for these secondary storage areas, something cheaper, not as depth in terms of the specifications. And the commission directed staff to take a look at this. We went back, talked about it internally. We did ask Mr. Schimmer about providing a detail of what he was looking for this. He came back indicating that he'd be looking at, just putting a 1 to 2 inch thick concrete pavers down in the actual soil with no sub-base, allowing it for smaller type, boats, equipment that aren't as heavy. We took a look at that and just felt that although Mr. Schimmer would maybe do a good job of maintaining that, there could be a different owner. This would affect the whole city if this is a text amendment. So we want to stick with these minimum standards for this type of paver block. If anything is less, and our city engineer looked at it, and I provided kind of a summary of his observations on this in the memo, that in general there would be concern about maintenance of this long term, that things would crack, it would settle. If you don't have a base there, it would just settle in the soil and become a maintenance problems. And we don't want also with our inspectors to trying to determine, what certain boats, trailers, small RVs, larger ones, what things weigh and what should be the appropriate base underneath it based on the weight of the whatever is being stored there. So it would just be kind of an enforcement challenge certainly for that. So we're staying with the language we had before based on what our city engineer is indicating that would be long lasting. And we also did receive this morning from Mr. Schimmer an email. I did provide part of that to you up on the dais. His concern or dissatisfaction with the city and not lowering the standards or waiving those somewhat. But again, we felt as a staff and the city engineer that what we're proposing is the minimum standards, and if we drop below that, we're going to run into maintenance problems. So languages did not change regarding that article. Any questions on that portion? If not, Article 12, simply landscape requirements. Instead of requiring, currently the language requires that in addition to landscaping shrubs and trees, that there be a buffer or other type of screening and yards adjoining a public roadway for projects. And that's very difficult on smaller sites in terms of getting enough width for a berm at the right slope. So what we're suggesting, instead of in lieu of these a berm or some other type of screening, that the additional shrubs be added to get the 100% screening. Regarding signs, we talked about at the fifth meeting, and some initial changes on signs. What we're going to do is wait for more of a comprehensive review of the sign changes amendments, and that will be coming up in a committee of the whole meeting of the council in the next month. There's one small change related to the Article 13 on signs, and that's allowing temporary off-site signs as allowing as a variance that can be applied for. And I'll go over that in a second here. Article 16 relates to just changing the name of from Board of Appeals to the Planning and Zoning Commission. The commission is acting as the Board of Appeals in terms of reviewing variances, so we're just changing that language. In Article 18, that's appeals and variances, again changing from Board of Appeals language to Planning and Zoning Commission. We added a couple of new additional criteria for findings of fact for variances to kind of strengthen those. Then we also cleared up what variances can be applied for. So we have specific language on, or expanded, I guess, to show what variances can be applied for. Also regarding yard, setback, landscaping, buffer requirements and regulations, height standards, maximum site coverage standards, reducing the lot area and width to a certain percentage, and also reducing parking requirements to a certain percentage too. So, and also allowing temporary off-site signage to be applied for as a variance, still having to meet all those standards. So there was no changes made in that seemed to be fine with the language we had before with the commission. So we do have the sample motion provided in the staff report. And the Exhibit A shows all the detailed changes that are being made.
Okay. Thank you. Given this is a continuation of a public hearing, I open it up to anybody in the public that has any comments or questions. And if so, you're welcome to go to the podium. And if you can state your name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Donna Gable. I live at 850 Sycamore Road in DeKalb. I may have missed that part. Did at one point you bring up the concept of parking areas and things that were more permeable than?
Yes, the language allows for, in residential and in commercial areas, to paver block something where the water can seep through, permeable, allowing that as an option. And in the commercial areas, providing some standards for that to make sure that it's constructed properly, and also formulas regarding the stormwater. So a developer could have a reduction in stormwater requirements if they have this type of concrete pavers. It's a little more eco-friendly type of option if they want to do that, and also allow it in the single family and residential areas too.
Well, I should say in general, I'm very much in favor of that personally. But I did want to relate an experience that I had, something to keep in mind. Last month in January, we had that one day where everything suddenly froze, the ground, everything was, and I parked in the Van Bureau parking lot to go get my hair cut over at Helen's on South 2nd Street. And there weren't a lot of cars in the lot, and I didn't think a whole lot of it. I got out, shut my door, took 3 steps, and went down. And luckily, I'm a pretty limber person, so I was shaken up and ended up with a couple of really big bruises, but nothing broke. When I walked into Helen's and she asked me what was wrong, and I said, I fell, she called the city and basically said, what are you folks going to do about the parking lot? And they basically indicated there wasn't a lot they could do because of the nature of the bricks, evidently. They can't use the same chemicals they use on the rest of the streets. Perhaps there's a different chemical or another process, but for some reason they couldn't take care of it. They hadn't taken care of it at that point. So I love the way that plaza looks. I'm glad it's permeable. I think there should be more of that. But I'm just wondering if that the fact of it does get icy in the winter is considered, if there are different products that can be used. I do know, for those of you who are familiar with the Morton Arboretum, just about every parking lot they have is permeable, yet they never seem to have a problem with ice like that. So I'm just wondering if you need to consider material as well as permeability. So thank you.
Good point. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to comment or have questions? Okay. So the commissioners. You look like you're ready to say something, Mr. Maxwell? No?
No,
Oh,
no,
okay.
I've said my piece.
So, Dan, she actually brings up a good point. Is there anything in that article that we need to consider or perhaps look
We
at?
can run it through our city engineer. I think that it's pretty detailed here in terms of specifications, in terms of depth of the paver blocks, the subsurface, and so I don't know if it's a situation like, I think it was more the treatment that was put on the bricks in terms of melting the ice and snow was cautiously used, I guess, and I'm not sure what was actually used, but we'll run it by our city engineer and see if that's, with all this language, is addressed properly. It deals a lot with stormwater, but there are specifications regarding the depth of the brick and everything in the base to make sure that it is good material that's going to hold up to commercial traffic in
So-
parking lots, so.
So with that, if we go ahead and approve this tonight, and when we make the motion, do we need to add that into the motion pending discussion on the?
I don't think so. I'll go ahead and contact them and
Okay.
bring up the concern and make sure.
And then if there's
Yeah.
any further,
What's that? Okay. We're already contacting
okay.
city engineer, Jolin is, regarding the concern, so.
And then if there's any further updates in the article,
Yeah, if we
you'll
need
just
to
bring it back
modify
later.
something, we can
Okay.
do it before this will be a motion to go, the motion is to approve and forward to the council, so.
Okay.
If we need to modify or tweak something, we can do that
Okay.
prior to the council action.
Okay. But she does bring up a good point. I mean, I could see
Yeah.
somebody doing this in their residence and not even thinking about that and putting a similar
Salt down,
surface
having
or
it all
something on it and, yeah, and
come
have, so.
apart. Yep.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions or comments on the changes? No? Okay. I think, I know Mr. Castro had submitted his questions and comments to you, so you're good with his input there. So I'll give one more opportunity for the public if anybody has any further questions or comments. And I believe we probably are okay with closing the public hearing for tonight and finishing this up. So I'm going to close the public hearing. Any further questions, comments, any other additional wording issues that you have? No? Okay. With that, I'd be happy to take a motion.
Just as I lost my page. Let's see if I can get through this. Based on the submitted petition and testimony presented, I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of the text amendments to the following articles of Chapter 23, Unified Development Ordinance of the Municipal Code, Article 7.06, to further restrict types of fences allowed, Article 7.12, to change who authorizes traffic studies, Article 12.03, to allow alternative paving materials for parking lots and driveways, Article 12.04, to modify the landscaping and berming requirements for front yards, Article 13.02, to allow variations for off-site and temporary signs, Article 16.03, to change the reference from Board of Appeals to Planning and Zoning Commission regarding appeals, and Article 18, to amend the regulation regarding the reference of the Board of Appeals, the appeals process, and clarifying what variances excuse me, can be applied for as shown in Exhibit A.
Second.
Motion made by Maxwell, second by Wright. Roll call?
Yes.
Klein?
Yes.
Maxwell?
Yes.
Wright?
Yes.
Barbie?
Yes.
Chair Doe?
Yes.
6 yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes.
Reports.
Yes, next commission meeting is February 20th. No public hearings. We will have a plat of re-subdivision for the Egyptian Theater. Looks like on the agenda. At the last council meeting, January 28th, the Sunvest Solar Garden on Gerler Road. The commission did look at in December. That was approved on second reading was approved. I think they're going through the state process through the lottery or whatever of all the solar facilities in the state. That's coming up this month, I believe, that process. So.
Okay. Great. Okay.
Last I heard, the state was only going to approve about 10% of them. Have you
Yeah.
heard anything more?
That's what I heard too, about 10% of them, yeah.
Yeah. And they had I read an article that they had quite a few applicants, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the count, Ron saw 30 plus
lot
of
of
them.
them right
go through.
Yeah. Yeah,
There's
there
quite
were
a few.
like 23 or something in the county.
Yes.
Yeah. That's good, though. But okay. So if nothing else, I'd be happy to take a motion to adjourn.
I have a random question.
Oh, go ahead.
Just out
Sorry.
of curiosity.
Just trying to cut everybody else.
I'm just curious. As I'm driving around town, I'm looking at parcels and lots and things where I know we've had things come before planning and zoning. We've approved construction and things like that, and it's been a year, nothing's done.
Yeah.
Is there a way to get a status update on some of these things?
I agree.
Yeah,
Like the Kelly Williamson on the lot at First and Hillcrest,
Yeah, nothing.
among others.
Mhm.
I'm just
The
curious.
storage Unit
Yeah,
on 4th Street.
yeah, I know the status. That's a whole other story.
And sometimes some things we approve and it goes to council and council doesn't approve them.
Right.
But we never know
There hasn't
that much.
been any of
I don't
those
think there's
recently,
been
but I
much
think
of
there's
that,
more
no.
delay. The
been a while.
one at First Street and Hillcrest,
Yeah,
Mobile, there.
that's the one that comes to mind, but there's
Yeah.
others.
We'll put a list together. They've indicated that they had another project in Rockford they were working on, and recently, they have 2 years after the special use is approved to
Okay.
pull permits.
I do
They've
know on that
indicated
one
they're
that- yeah.
aware of that timeframe
Okay.
and are looking at this site and may need to get an extension.
Sure.
So how does that work then, the extension piece of it? Does it have to come back through us or does that just go through
I
city
think
council?
there's, a council can extend it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they have to request it, yeah. But the permits are good for, special use permits for 2 years. They have to start, I think, significant construction. I'm not sure the language within 2-year timeframe, so they're aware of that, and they may have to get an extension.
That's just the one that comes to mind. There's a handful of other ones
Yeah.
I know that's come before us, and then you don't see anything happen. I was just curious if there's.
Yeah, I'll put a list together. I
Yeah,
can
I'm
talk to
just
you
curious.
which ones your
Yeah.
specific ones.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just curious.
and we'll put that list together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Told you it was
I
random.
think that's a good idea because sometimes we spend hours here and then nothing happens. Like,
Or we don't
Yeah.
know if anything happens.
Yeah.
Right.
We have a development project sheet, it's on the webpage.
Okay.
But we need to keep that constantly updated, and that does list past projects and kind of where they're at in the
Mhm.
process.
Interesting. Thank you.
Good random question.
Just happened to come, it's been bothering me. Thought I'd throw it out there.
Anything else? No? Okay. I'll take a motion to adjourn from,
So
if you wish.
moved.
So moved by Buckley, second by Klein.
Everybody made
How's that?
Everybody made that, yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.
Motion by